amazing rando. Of course, we have our two runners here putting up a great show. We have Nicky, which has been running the randomizer for about 4.5 months. And it does look like we are already on their way. So we will get to see what is in the first chest real shortly. Just Red Rupee, please bear with us as we are going to sync up the streams as well, so that everything will be nice and easy going. We get our first map check. Quite a convenient pause as well. We can see that at least 2 of the Light World dungeons are going to be pendants today.
And I believe that I saw Tower of Hera was a crystal on just the frame before we've paused here.
Yes, it does seem to be the case, which is always a scary thought to see the Light World dungeons being pendants, as that does give a high probability of the pedestal might be passing some required item.
And it looks like our uncle randomized weapon is going to be Cane of Samaria this time. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Stan, as among the possibilities for randomized weapons?
I myself prefer the bow because it is just a lot faster, but I'm not going to lie, the Cane of Samaria is one of the more fun items. Of course, it does use quite a lot of magic, but fortunately, if our runners happen to run out of magic, they can just save and quit, and when they reload their save, they will regain all of their magic.
Yep, and as we were going through that, both runners picking up the lamp from the chest in the sewer with Uncle takes dark rooms out of the equation immediately. Kind of an equalizer between players who may or may not have different levels of familiarity with those.
Definitely so. Dark rooms are not the easiest thing to do. There are certain rooms that are easier than others, definitely. So this will make sure that neither runner will have the advantage when it comes to dark rooms. aLderzz here coming up on the vanilla boomerang chest.
Very cleanly taking out the green guard there. One of the more random ones in terms of ways that he can move.
Definitely, but we find the moon pearl already, which is it's been quite a trend I've noticed with early with early moon pearl, which of course is part 1 to the Dark World puzzle. Our runners will be happy to find all of them, of course, because that means that Aghanim is not going to be required to see.
Yes, but of course, the closer we get to Dark World access, the closer we get to that third pendant and the possibility of pedestal being required, as we were talking about earlier.
Yes, we also see our first bottle, this time with a red potion, which will restore all of your hearts. It is a very nice safety to have, as well as the fact that the bottle will unlock the Sickid in Kakariko village.
Yes, so that's very nice to pick up for your early routing. Another thing that the runners are going to be looking for that neither of them have picked up yet is a bomb drop from an enemy. With Cane of Samaria, they do have a fair number of options for farming those. They can, of course, attack random enemies out here in the early half, but they can also kill a lot of rats, kill a lot of snakes in the sewer's second half of Escape to try and get one of those, open up the bombable wall near the end of Escape and get those 3 chests without having to double back.
Definitely, that would save quite a lot of time. Otherwise, it would be necessary to find the lamp or the globe in order to get back to those. Of course, we have already found the lamps, so technically speaking, the 3 chests are ready within logic. But we will just have to wait and see if the rats and snakes are going to be generous with the bomb drops today.
Yes, and even with the lamp, while it does put Escape back in logic, as they will get the light cone even after they've rescued Zelda, never any fun to come back into Escape the long way rather than dropping down through the graveyard.
if it can be avoided, our runners would like to get at least one bomb indeed, as well as some rupees, because in this game there are certain areas where rupees will be required, most notably the King Zora, which will require a whopping 500, the Bottle Vendor, and as well to get into one of the dungeons.
Yeah, and we do see both aLderzz and Nickynoel hitting a few of those snakes in that packed hallway, trying to get that bomb drop. aLderzz does pick up a few of those rupees, so that's a nice secondary prize. But at this point, it's looking less and less likely that they are going to be able to open that bombable wall.
Yes, very unfortunate. aLderzz is going to want to probably kill all the enemies within this room, hoping, and decides not to waste his time on the rats and bats. Instead, is going to head on out to finish the rescue of Zelda. We'll see what Nicky decides to do here. Also decides to forgo the chests, so no early advantage for us today, as we grab the Sanctuary chest with only 50 rupees. Sorry, 20 rupees, that is.
Yes, and I believe by our item counts that we are going to have just 2 non-dungeon items in those chests. So maybe the runners taking that into account will be a little less urgent in coming back and picking up those 3 items. Getting small magic refills from the tree pole there, considering that Canis Maria is still the runner's only weapon, kind of a nice thing to know about. aLderzz routing in the lumberjack check, whereas Nickynoel skipping that as well as the tree pole and going straight to Lost Woods. aLderzz seeing just a arrow refill up on the lumberjack, so another strike against the possibility of Aga being required in this seed.
Yes, our runners will definitely not take the time to kill Ganon for just an arrow upgrade, as we do find out that there is a full heart container in the forest, which, as early as it is in the seed, is always welcome to find some more health.
And 50 rupees inside the Lost Woods cave here. Sometimes you'll see runners skipping that later on, but this early, when they're wanting to build up 100 rupees for that bottle merchant, it does look like they're both choosing to pick that up.
Yes, and with that being said, both runners will have enough to get the bottle vendor, so there will not be an early lead, as we will find out what the bottle vendor holds. Of course, without those bombs that they did not collect from the escape, they are either hoping to find some in this chest, the back of the tavern. Otherwise, they are going to have to spend 50 rupees for a 10-pack down at the shop. Both of our runners remembering that they did pick up that first bottle. Unfortunately, it is nothing of importance. Although a nice safety to have, of course.
Yes, and of course that 50 rupee purchase of bombs does cut into their funds a little bit, but with 30 rupees in Blind's Hut minimum found under pots and 10 rupees in the bottom of the well, most likely they are still going to have that 100 rupees that they need for the bottle vendor in the end.
Meanwhile, in the chicken hut, we find glove number 1, the power glove, which is part 2 to our Dark World puzzle, of course, for which we would either need the hammer or another glove upgrade.
And Nickynoel choosing to drop into the bottom of the well as aLderzz goes into Blind's Hut. So we will see both of our most item-dense locations in Kakariko more or less simultaneously.
Yes, it is definitely exciting what we'll find here. Looks like the cave.
Nickynoel. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
Sorry. The wow, I'm really off right now. Looks like the drop-down cave did not have anything of importance, but meanwhile, on the other side, we did get to see Blue Mail and the Book of Medora. Unfortunately, that is, I believe, all that we are going to find in Thieves' Hideout.
Yes, Nickynoel just picking up a couple of additional pieces of heart and a full heart container from bottom of the well.
Yes, and with finding that mail upgrade, I would like to mention the sprites that our runners are using. On the left here, you can see, I believe that is Dark Zelda, and on the right is Andy's Pug. Of course, whenever you yourself play the rando, you will have a choice of a plethora of custom-made sprites, which all have their own animations, bunny sprites, as well as death animation.
Yes, and for those of you unfamiliar with the Dark Zelda sprite, I do believe that you can watch the eyes to see the male color. So eyes are blue right now, indicating blue male. I believe those will switch to red when and if she gets the red male upgrade.
Speaking of blue, we can also see on aLderz's side that he has chosen the blue hearts, which is also one of the more recent customizations. Meanwhile, though, Nicky is opting to go back into the escape, having bought those bombs. He's going to have no trouble getting these 3 chests.
And meanwhile, aLderzz sees flute on the library shelf. That is, in a way, interesting for runners. That tells them that it's very likely that they're going to be receiving boots at some point during the seed to get that flute and be able to move around. On the other hand, kind of a bummer that they're not going to be getting flute immediately and getting that increased mobility around the map a little bit faster.
Yes, it is always a bummer to have to go back to pick up something that allows you to move faster. But in this case, the flute may not be required, but our runners will most certainly pick that up if they happen to get the boots, because it makes traversing the Hyrule area just that much easier. As we see Nicky taking a dive into the mini Moldome cave, we're going to see King Strat today, and Bomb Strats, pulling out all the stops.
Yeah, kind of an interesting routing decision. Not one that's by any means unseen, but most runners, I think, choose to check the entrance to Swamp Palace for its 2 chests before routing into Mini Moldorm Cave. Nickynoel, for the time being at least, choosing to skip that. May come back, but may delay that a little bit longer.
Nicky does find a sword, though, as well as the Mire, which will, ironically enough, speed up the first visit to the dam because of a little glitch that can be performed when interacting with moving blocks. So to explain how that would work is this game has some very weird properties, especially with moving blocks, because when blocks are moving, they are not considered solid objects. Therefore, you are allowed to use items, and as you saw there, using the Mire on a moving block will cause it to disappear.
Yes, that's a Japanese 1.0 specific glitch. So things like shooting the fire rod through blocks, using the hook shot to get through blocks as they're moving. You'll probably see at some point all of those in this run, and all of them specific to that 1.0 version.
We do see Nicky here opting to visit Agina's cave, which is one of the more out-of-the-way locations, but it's definitely one of those locations that, if left alone for too long, can really come back to bite our runners, as it is the Sphere 1 item location pool, which means it is reachable right after escape.
And aLderzz, meanwhile, taking a little bit longer, using full cane strats rather than spending some of his bombs on Mini Moldorm Cave. Fortunately, getting a full magic refill drop, so he does not have to worry about not having a weapon. He will have plenty more uses of Samaria left.
Yes, our runners, or aLderzz, will have no trouble with his magic situation, as it looks like he is going to take a peek into the Ice Rod Cave as Nicky is opening up Desert.
Yes, and Nikki saw a sword upgrade over here on the ledge, so she will probably be going over to get that as soon as reasonably possible. That upgrade to the Master Sword, not only necessary for completing the game, but a big increase in terms of offensive power for the entire game, all the dungeons, all the overworld stuff. Very nice to have.
Nicky, finding a small key in that chest, is able to open the door to the right here in order to get these two chests. We have not seen yet whether or not the boots will be required to beat this dungeon. And it looks like they are not required to beat the dungeon, but there may still be a required item on that torch.
And at this point, with Flute on Library Ledge, boots being required to beat this dungeon, again, would almost be a boon to these runners, as it would tell them makes it more and more likely that they're going to find boots somewhere in a relatively early check that they make. So even if they're forced to go out of their way for it, it does mean that they will have that speed boost at some point.
Unfortunately, it is just a compass, as we see aLderzz making use of his glove and lamp to save Gary, the old man, which is, of course, going to grant him with one additional item as well as a save and quit point right here on Death Mountain. aLderzz receiving a little tip from the old man for bringing him home. Is going to be making up his way up Death Mountain. Of course, with that mirror in hand, we will most likely see a dip into the Tower of Hera as Nicky picks up her Master Sword.
And with a fire source, Nicky will be able to complete this dungeon. Unfortunately, lacking something like Silver Arrow's Fire Rod, one of the weapons that can make Landmolus a little bit faster. And given that Desert Palace is a pendant dungeon, kind of an interesting choice to complete this boss here. But as long as you're over, it does give you the possibility of an extra item, and puts you ahead in cases where you're worried about a pedestal seed.
Yes, we also find out that on the Ether tablet was just an arrow upgrade. So it is not a detriment to aLderzz for not picking up that second sword. Meanwhile, we do see the dip into the Tower of Hera. Of course, Tower of Hera being a crystal, it had to be done at some point. And we unfortunately find the key, which means that if the big key is not in this chest, we will have to take a little coffee break in the downstairs room.
Yes, and we did see aLderzz passing up the shovel on top of Spectacle Rock. Kind of an interesting choice, as that does unlock an item location that could end up being required.
aLderzz successfully achieving his coffee break by being in the right position when the pegs move up. Because the game will not outright kill you for being in an invalid position. Instead, the game will give you infinite invincibility frames. So if you have a cup of tea to make, this will be the right time to do so.
Nicky, meanwhile, finishing off the third Landmolus head, or Landmolus body, I suppose. With the amount of health that she had, and with the Master Sword to do plenty of damage, not really a terribly taxing fight, but it does take a little while to accomplish.
And just like the vanilla game, finding the big key in the basement of Hera. We'll be going up to get the remaining chests and eventually the crystal that lies atop.
Nickynoel, save quitting after Landmolus here. Looks like she may be going up to check that lumberjack item now. Possibly concerned. Oh, nope, excuse me. Instead of that, going up into Old Man Cave, going to hit Dark World, and presumably take that Tower of Hera path that we saw aLderzz take as well.
Yes, we will probably see that paths converging right now, as we did see aLderzz perform a technique called a bomb jump. In this game, whenever Link gets damaged by a bomb, he will receive recoil. And our runners have found out that you could use that to make it over small gaps, which is what you saw aLderzz do there. Oop, gets denied by Muldorm. Has to be careful here not to fall, especially not down that middle hole, because that will send you down 2 entire floors, which is quite a time sink.
Yes, and with just Fighter Sword here, it's going to take 6 hits on Muldorm, regardless of whether they use slashes, spins, or pokes. And unfortunately, they're not going to be able to avoid this phase here, where Muldorm speeds up. Thankfully, getting out of it okay, getting that last hit in, and will earn that crystal for it.
Yes, and at that, we have collected our first crystal only 21 minutes in. Of course, we have just only visited the Light World dungeons and have yet to see a Dark World map check from either of our runners, I believe. Ooh, we do see aLderzz saving and quitting, opting to leave the shovel behind, as you said earlier. While Nicky did pick it up, is going to claim the Ether Tablet only for a bomb upgrade.
Yes, and considering that he is going left here, coming up right under the location where he would check the shovel, I'm wondering if maybe this is just an oversight and he's not realizing that he did not make that grab. Yeah, and he's checking his menu, seeing that the shovel is not in his inventory. It looks like that was just a mistake, and that's going to be an unfortunate time loss for aLderzz.
Yes, it will be interesting to see whether or not he will live with his gamble of not picking up the shovel, or if he will take the time to go back up that mountain and getting that shovel. Meanwhile, we see both our runners crossing paths. aLderzz will be going for Desert Palace, take a peek within there, probably pick up his Master Sword as well. We'll be very happy to find that. As Nicky is opting not to take the coffee break, instead wants to keep ahead in the game and get some target practice.
Sometimes you got some extra energy that you need to work off. No time for coffee. And of course, one advantage of aLderzz, although of course, if he had picked up shovel, almost certainly after hitting dig spot, he would have come here anyway. But this just means that he will get his Master Sword just that little bit sooner, putting our runners back on an even keel in terms of their offensive output.
Definitely, we do see the both of our runners making their way through their respective dungeons, treading in each other's footsteps.
Yes, and as we see both of them do some things that we've seen before, now's maybe a good time to think about where will they both go after this. The one major thing that we have not seen yet is checks to Eastern Palace and Sahasrarla's Cave, big source of items in the early game. One other thing that is an option for both runners is fake flippers to check Hobo. Because they have the Moon Pearl, check Waterfall Cave, and potentially go all the way up to Zora if they can scrounge up 500 rupees and get that item as well.
Yes, that would definitely be an interesting to see our runners converging on what it will probably be either Eastern Palace or the path to Zora. So far, this seed has been fairly linear in terms of open locations or open item densities.
Yeah, given that Nickynoel chose to go to Desert first over South Side, I think that we may see her go to Eastern Palace first, perhaps making that bet on this being a pedestal steed or those pendants being required. Difficult to say for sure, though.
Definitely, it is much too early to begin calling any sort of strategy that this seed has planned out for our runners. Of course, we are looking for either the hammer or the glove upgrade to really blow this seed open. So it will be interesting to see whether that lies within Eastern Palace or perhaps Sahasrara is holding out on us.
And aLderzz exiting Desert Palace and going to Agina's Cave and then saving and quitting, electing not to finish off Land Molus while he was there. Potentially a good choice if that pendant does not end up being required.
Yes, of course, both of our runners do have the book, so whenever they make their way up to the Lost Woods, perhaps when they check out the Skullwoods dungeon, we might see a quick pedestal.
Yeah, and of course, aLderzz missing out on that small shield by not killing Land Molus, but that's not a terrible... Oh! And Nickynoel, having the shovel, does have the opportunity to check that dig spot and does find flippers. That's some pretty important progression. aLderzz is going to be kicking himself once he goes back to find that shovel and finds what he missed.
Definitely, though this may not be the end of the world, for we still do not know where the green pendant is located. I'm not sure if either of our runners has spoken to Sahasrara, which in the randomizer will tell you where the green pendant is, regardless of whether or not you have access to the Dark World or have the map to that specific dungeon within Key Sanity mode, that is.
Yeah, typically a trick more useful in Key Sanity, but also possible for use here in this case where the runners without access to the Dark World map so far do not have that information.
Nicky opting not to check the race item first, unfortunately finds out that it is a bomb for a bomb. We do see aLderzz heading into the Eastern Palace, finds the big key in the first chest. So if the items are laid out just right, we might not need to visit the vanilla big key room, which will save a considerable amount of time. Of course, neither of our runners having found the bow, I feel that it will be extremely unlikely that our runners will skip that chest, unless, of course, the map and compass are the last items to be found.
Yes, and Nickynoel, meanwhile, making use of those flippers, seeing that there is just 300 rupees on Lake Hylia Island, and checking the hobo to receive the mitts. This miss of the shovel looks like it's turning out to be very important, as that is another essential progression item and does give Nickynoel Dark World access.
Yes, of course, this does not mean the end for aLderzz, though, as he will be able to get those mitts by use of the fake flipper minor glitch. But of course, by logic, it is 100% required to get that shovel.
Yes, and considering that he is probably not looking forward to returning to Dark World, Death Mountain, making that climb up there, fake flippers may, after he exits Eastern Palace, be the next thing that he does, which would net him those mitts.
Meanwhile, we will be seeing Nicky taking a dive into the Dark World here, using her newly acquired Titan's mitts. We'll be checking out the villages, the outcasts, and we might even see her going up to Skull Woods to take a peek at those two items. Of course, we are not able to complete it, for we need the fire rod to open the front door to the dungeon. But regardless, it is still two items which could be important. As I speak
And that's a pretty important item.
The hook shot is one of the more major movement items. As we get a map check, I did catch that Turtle Rock and Palace of Darkness are our 5/6 crystals.
Yeah, unfortunately, that one took me by surprise. I did not see where the green pendant was. It looks like our illustrious tracker did. We are seeing Skull Woods as our green pendant.
Meanwhile, I believe we are seeing an Aghanim play here from aLderzz, probably thinking that the mids are locked behind Aghanim due to the absence of that shovel.
Yeah, this can be a good gamble when you've gone through a considerable amount of the overworld and not found that dark world access to jump in there without checking every single thing. Unfortunately, in this case, as we know as commentators, not the ideal choice.
Yes, of course, we have the advantage of having two screens to watch and check for item locations.
Now, of course, having said that, Nickynoel's Dark World access is coming from the mitts, and that does make it possible. This is one of those rare cases where Aghanim access, though not required, may be useful simply for the ability to access East Dark World without having to go the long way around. Beating Aghanim does open that Dark World portal at the gate of Hyrule Castle, and with just mitts as Dark World access, the only way into Dark World is the way that we saw from Nickynoel of course, Nickynoel can also get into Dark World on Death Mountain, but the only way into the main continent of Hyrule's Dark World is through the method that we've seen. So this could still turn out to be a appropriate play from aLderzz.
Definitely. The hammer could still be in its vanilla dungeon, of course, which I believe would make Aghanim required. Meanwhile, though, we do see the digging game from Nicky's side as aLderzz makes his way to the top of Aghanim's tower, as we find only a bomb upgrade, unfortunately. My apologies, I have made an error in my routing. It is possible to swim to the east part of the Dark World, of course. Thanks, chat, for correcting me on that one.
Yes, and aLderzz, even though this Aghanim play may or may not turn out to be worthwhile, making it up there at a relatively fast pace, having the Master Sword and having a stun item makes it pretty straightforward to get up there without too much difficulty. Nickynoel, meanwhile, electing to complete a few more overworld checks before dipping into Thieves Town, finished up Village of Outcasts, not finding anything too exciting there, and deciding to take care of the overworld. And it looks like even getting Purple Chest and maybe choosing to go down there before continuing on into that dungeon.
Yes, definitely. There is always this sort of balance that has to be struck between dungeon diving and overworld exploration. I have not looked at the numbers myself, but I believe that in this version of the randomizer, overworld is slightly more higher valued, but it's pretty much a 50-50 toss-up between which would be statistically the better option. As we see Nicky getting a full heart and having trouble picking the chest back. but manages to do it nonetheless.
Yeah, sometimes you hit A, and then it doesn't want to come back with you. It likes where it is.
Yes, of course. Happy to look out not to Mire, because otherwise that chest will reset as aLderzz successfully finishes off Ganon. Will be spit out on the Pyramid of Power. Will give us a look at the Pyramid item as well. Only 50 rupees, I believe that was, opting not to pick those.
Yes, and one advantage of the route that Nickynoel is taking, as she finds a 50 rupees here in the purple chest, is with Book and Master Sword, she is also going to be able to check Bombo's tablet on this route down. This is one of the more efficient possibilities for routing this thing, and probably the reason that she chooses to do those overworld checks is the ability to get them all knocked off at once.
That is certainly a very handy situation to be in. Meanwhile, talking of routing, another one of these hard to route items is the catfish. Now, I don't believe either of our runners, and Vanilla Quake, by the way. I don't believe we have seen either of our runners go up to Zora. aLderzz does have the mirror, so I would have imagined he'd have mirrored that and check out the Waterfall Fairy Cave.
Yeah, unfortunately, aLderzz without the flippers, not going to be able to simply jump in the water. There are a few possibilities for setting up fake flippers. I'm not sure if I'm not 100% up on my glitches, so I'm not sure if it's easy to do from that screen. But he does, with the Moon Pearl, have the ability to check that Waterfall Fairy if he sets himself up right.
Meanwhile, Hype Cave turning up with a lot of money, but not anything that our runners would want, unfortunately, as we see aLderzz taking a dive into the Palace of Darkness.
Yeah, and we commented on that Vanilla Quake. We have not seen a check of either Misery Mire or Turtle Rock from either of our runners. Those would be very hard to route in at this point, of course, so we'll almost certainly see those later. But very interesting to note how this one minor difference has led to a pretty significant route divergence that at this point could still end up going either way for our runners. If Quake ends up being a required medallion to enter either of those two crystal dungeons, that choice to beat Ganon and check Catfish could still turn out to be a good play for aLderzz.
Yes, this could definitely still turn into aLderzz's favor if Ganon happens to be required. Meanwhile, Nicky finding the fire rod in the lower two chests of Paradox Cave. That does look like the only item of value in the Paradox Cave. aLderzz finds, I believe that was Ether.
Yes, let's find Ether in Palace of Darkness for sound on not getting that he is potentially getting a piece from his choices in and look like continue on. He is to perform the some of that blocking and putting on there, choosing to come back to the light world. And since he's going to Mountain Cave here, it looks like maybe going to continue on the path of progression that Nickynoel has advanced through.
My apologies.
Looks like Discord may be giving us some difficulties here in terms of latency and voice quality. We'll try and talk as loud and slow as we possibly can to hopefully give you some idea of what we're actually saying.
Yes, definitely. And just to reiterate, our primary objective is to answer questions as quick as possible. Meanwhile...
Okay, and we're getting from chat now that maybe our quality is back up. So thank you, Discord.
Yes, wonderful. As we see aLderzz going back for his shovel, we'll be happy to find those flippers. As we see Nicky taking a dive into Super Bunny Cave, unfortunately misses the hookshot clip, but gets through without too much trouble.
Yes, and considering the checks that aLderzz has done in the Dark World already, we may see him progress from getting those flippers directly to getting his mitts, and then directly to checking Village of Outcasts and getting his hook shot. So it may turn out that this route divergence ends up as just a divergence and not too much of a time loss. Nickynoel, meanwhile, without either of those medallions, going over to check Turtle Rock and does find that it is Quake. So though she does not know it yet, that is available on Catfish. And as you said, Stan, because of that out of the wayness of that check, it may be a while before she gets that. We may find that to be a differentiating factor between our two runners.
Definitely. One thing that I've noticed in this seed is there are a lot of locations that just end up being pretty convoluted to get to, such as these faraway locations. Of course, Nicky's last place to expect Quake will be its vanilla spot, which in Randomizer is pretty much the trolliest place for it to be.
And both of our runners holding hands here. Nickynoel going a little bit faster as she does have the hook shot to accelerate her movement. But both of them coming down to pick up this rock, and it's possible that they may continue on together for a little bit further, as after checking Village of Outcasts, Nickynoel, Nickynoel, of course, already having checked Village of Outcasts, looks like she is going back down to head into Thieves Town. aLderzz performing his map check and may end up making the same choice.
Yes, it does look like aLderzz will be making his way to the Village of the Outcasts, as Nicky goes into the Thieves Town. Of course, aLderzz will be happy to pick up his hook shot, I believe. Yes, there it is. It's going to make the overworld routing a bit easier to do, as well as his access to East Death Mountain.
Now, Nickynoel, this is a routing choice that, unless I'm mistaken, and she's checked those chests previously, it does look like she's progressing just straight on into blind. That's a very unusual choice, so I'm thinking that I may just be mistaken, and she did check those 4 chests in Thieves Town prior to coming back here to finish the dungeon.
That is correct. I do remember seeing at least one of our runners go into Thieves Town, and I don't believe aLderzz had Dark World access at the time. So we will be seeing a full clear here, of course, as Thieves Town is a crystal.
Yes, and of course, without the hammer, depending on our item counts, it may or may not be necessary to come back yet again to check that big chest locked by the hammer, which is not necessary to complete the dungeon, but can potentially be necessary if you need all those items.
Definitely, not having the hammer is quite a big detriment. Also seeing that the hammer is the single most blocked item, meaning that it is pretty much required for a lot of stuff. And as we are here 45 minutes in and still on hammer, it does start to worry where that hammer is. As we find our second shield for Nicky.
Yes, and I believe that is 3 non-dungeon items found in Thieves' Town, which means that if that item is not on blind, then there is 1 item remaining inside the big chest.
Yes, unfortunately, our runners will have to take some time out of their exploration to go back here. But as we see Nicky's blind fight, of course, on your casual playthrough, this fight might be a complete nightmare to do, as there are flying heads and fireballs all over the place. But our runners are able to make it a pretty much scripted fight by doing the exact same thing, as the pattern blind takes is pretty much set in stone.
Yes, and Nickynoel, little bit of trouble in the 3rd phase, but not really taking too much damage, and receiving that 4th item. So the runners will know as they complete this dungeon that they will not need to dip back in here and get the item out of that hammerlock chest, as it is one of the dungeon items, map or compass, that is not necessary.
Meanwhile, I do believe we will see Nicky taking a dip into Skull Woods, which will be the first for either of our runners. So it will be interesting to see whether or not there is something hidden within this dungeon, and if maybe Mothula will be beat as well.
Yes, considering that Skullwoods is the green pendant, and considering the choice that she made in routing Desert Palace, just choosing to go ahead and beat Lanmolus, we may see Nicky take the choice to just beat Mothula as well while she's here, unlocking at least 1 guaranteed item by getting that green pendant that can be turned into Sasrala, and of course keeping that pedestal dream alive in case that turns out to be necessary.
Definitely, I'm sure that our chat will be delighted to find out what is on that pedestal, and we very well may get that check.
Yeah, equipping the fire rod here, it does look like Nickynoel is choosing to go into the dungeon before using the mirror to go and make that pet check. Although almost certainly on the way out, she will use the mirror, use the book, and see what is on pedestal.
Yes, information is one of the most powerful things to have in a randomizer, because it will allow you to route better in terms of what you will have to do and what might be optional. Of course, also Skullweeds, being the green pendant, also puts some more weight on this dungeon, as it will unlock 1 more item from Sahasrara.
And aLderzz, meanwhile, taking care of that scripted blind fight with relative ease. Again, a little bit of confusion on the 3rd phase, but getting that crystal was no problem.
Definitely, as we see Nicky taking on the Moth. Of course, using the fire rod here to make sure Moth does not stay at the top of the room. It's not giving her a very nice pattern, though. Has to watch out. Of course, a lot of health to work with, which is very fortunate for our runners.
And of course, the reason she's wanting to keep him away from the top of the room is if Mothula does hit those spikes, due to a bug in the original game's coding, damage is canceled. So any damage that you do with the fire rod, with the sword, if Mothula touches a spike afterwards, that damage does not count.
Yes, and with that being said, Mothula has been dispatched of, and the green crystal has been get. It'll be interesting to see when we see Nikki going back to that Sahasrara's hut in order to check what Mothula has been holding.
Yes, and it looks like Nikki's decision here is essentially just to route Skullwudge in reverse, killing Mothula first, and now going back through and getting all of the items out of their relative chests. With the mirror, I think that this is an appropriate choice because, as you can see there, after getting the map, just mirroring out makes that a very quick check. Going through backwards lets you, once you've got those two items out, just leave and be able to walk out of Skullwoods rather than needing to do anything else.
Yes, and with that being said, unfortunately, we find out that there is just a piece of heart on the pedestal.
So that Land Mollusk fight for Nikki, giving her a tier 2 shield, but apart from that, not turning out to be completely necessary in the grand scheme of this seed.
Meanwhile, we are seeing aLderzz retracing Nikki's step in carrying the purple chest as well as checking a couple of overworld locations, making sure he does not miss anything.
Yes, and Nikki electing to just walk out of Skullwoods. As we said, we'll be making a quick check of Bumper Cave, seeing just a small piece of heart up here. And knowing by this point, from the items that she has, that defeating Aghanim 1, very unlikely to be necessary for the seed, not electing to route in a mirror and a check of that cave at this point.
Yeah, and with that, I do believe that we are running short on item locations to check. So any of these upcoming locations surely must hold a form of progression with either perhaps the bow and arrow or the hammer itself.
Yes, and of course, given that Misery Mile is a crystal, we do know now that flute will definitely be required at some point, which means that our runners will be finding boots in order to knock that off of the library ledge.
Now, meanwhile, we do see aLderzz going to the very rich Hype Cave. Ash, Nikki is going to get her Vanilla Quake Medallion, and perhaps we might even see a Zora check, as Nikki does have almost 1,000 rupees, which is more than enough to purchase whatever Zora is holding. And that seems to be all but confirmed by equipping the mirror. We'll be getting her Quake Medallion, as well as whatever lies in the Zora's Waterfall.
Oh yes, and the Waterfall Cave. I completely forgot. Nikki chose to leave immediately after getting mitts rather than completing the loop after Hobo, and does find the boots in there. Maybe wishes that she had continued on, but that's going to be very important. And almost certainly, immediately choosing to leave here rather than going to Zora, she's going to hop over there, get that flute, activate it, and have a significant advantage in mobility around the map.
Yes, definitely. With the acquisition of the boots, that will open up quite some locations. Of course, the entirety of the Misery Mire area, due to having both the Mire as well. It'll be interesting to see what medallion we will need to get into Misery Mire, as we might see a small dip into that dungeon. Now everyone, please rise for the Randomizer National Anthem. Beautiful. And with that being said, the goose is loose, as Nicky is going to fly her way into the Misery Mire area. We'll be finding out soon whether or not we still need the elusive Bombos medallion, as we take a check in the Mire shed. Gets a nice first frame dash in order to make it through those two bubbles unharmed. Finding the Tempered Sword, which by all means is not required, or is definitely a nice upgrade, as the time difference between Master Sword Ganon and Tempered Ganon is quite substantial. We do see that Ether is in fact required to enter Misery Mire, which aLderzz will have access to if he goes there after getting his boots.
Yes, and seeing, I'm not sure if Nickynoel checked this as well, and if she did, then I don't believe we commented on it, but a 5 bomb capacity upgrade on the floating island. So aLderzz, as he checks the Silkshot Cave, will not go up to get that, most likely.
That is definitely not worth the detour, as we will find out what the king has been buried with. Look like it's his heirloom of 300 rupees.
They say you can't take it with you, but I guess you can if you have it buried with you, right?
True that, and thankfully so, because you can never have too many rupees in this game for any potions and the like, as well as the plethora of locations requiring money.
Yes, and with the flute, it's very easy to hop over to Witch's Hut, pick up a few potions, and those are useful not just for safety, but also potentially for activating that bottle glitch in pod that unlocks the camera. As neither of our runners have yet found the bow, that may turn out to be useful.
Definitely. We did see a small dip into pod, but I do not recall there to be anything except for the Ether Medallion, I believe.
Yes, Ether Medallion and half magic for aLderzz on that dip into pod.
Oh yeah, I was wondering where he'd get that, as we found out that Sahasra is just holding some bombs. It also looks like this will be Nicky's first trip over to the eastern part of the Light World, and we'll most likely see a dip. Never mind. Instead, Nicky is going to be cleaning up as aLderzz gets his boots, and will probably, after his visit to Zora, go straight to the library to also get its flute gun activated.
Yes, kind of an interesting difference in routing between these two. Nickynoel, of course, as soon as she got the boots, choosing to leave, get that flute, and activate it. And that's an important thing to do, as the flute does just increase your mobility so much. But there isn't a fantastic flute point that does lead you back to Zora. And so, in a way, coming up and checking this beforehand, also a meaningful routing decision.
Yes, fortunately so, there is only a piece of heart at Zora. So by no means required, but it does look like we will get the same check from Nicky right this moment, as aLderzz will be checking out his Kingston. Now, also, one interesting note is that I believe Swamp Palace has been open to our runners for quite some time now. Of course, it will take a pretty big detour in order to get there. But of course, Swamp Palace...
aLderzz going to the weather vane, attempting to activate the flute, and then realizing, oh, I have to actually collect it first. So taking a quick hop down there to get that taken care of. And now, with flute in hand, that shovel will go into the back of the item menu, never to be seen again, now that aLderzz has hit his dig spot, and we will get a flute activation from him.
Yes, that will indeed speed up aLderzz's movement on the overworlds by quite a lot, as we see Nicky using the flippers in order to check the pyramid item, which I believe was only 50 rupees, but more importantly, we'll probably be taking a look into Palace of Darkness.
And aLderzz, meanwhile, I believe making that little turn to the right to see that Mire does require ether to open, so he may, after checking Mire Shed and Checkerboard Cave, immediately choose to take a dip in there.
And it does look like that will be the case.
Sure enough, choosing not even to check Checkerboard Cave, instead just immediately casting that medallion with his Tempered Sword now, as he did check Mire Shed, receive that, and will, with his choice of the hook shot or boots, be able to get past the first room here, go in and open up a few chests.
Oop, accidentally slid off the ledge there. Thankfully, these slime enemies are no threat at all.
Yes, using the boots to bonk across there, definitely the quicker way to get through, as it doesn't require a menu opening, but a little bit tricky, as there's very little space there. Easy to accidentally grab onto the block or nudge yourself off by accident.
Yes, and with that being said, Nicky picking up her ether medallion, as well as aLderzz going to open the first chest here. And we have the Godmire today. Big key in the first chest of the day. Rather that our runners are still not in mode. So seeing some more from...
Yes, and Nickynoel, having to go back, did not activate that potion glitch on the first time, it doesn't look like, but we'll be choosing with her red potion to activate that potion glitch. What she's trying to do here is unlock the camera, and we'll see here as she goes to the right, the camera moves with her. What she needs to do is move that red mimic in such a way that it is trapped against the pot on the left-hand side here. Once she does, she will kill the green mimics, and it looks like instead she'll be choosing to kill the green mimics with sword beams. And yes, as the red mimic moves off screen there, you see the door open. This glitch has to do with the way that Link to the Past recognizes whether an enemy is dead or not. Once it moves off the camera for door opening purposes, it no longer exists. And so with no enemies on screen, that door opens and Nickynoel is able to open these two chests.
Definitely, which is by logic considered a sequence break. Meanwhile, though, in Misery Mire, we did find the hammer, which in turn will open a plethora of new locations. We will see aLderzz continuing on using that aforementioned block push glitch in order to light these torches significantly easier.
And Nickynoel, meanwhile, with the 2 keys that she's picked up, electing not to perform Hammer Yump, probably will not turn out to be necessary here, as she will go on and almost certainly receive further keys here from these chests.
aLderzz coming up on the big chest here as Nicky finds the silver arrows in the Harmless Hellway. Although they may not be required by our runners, they are definitely required in logic and a very nice item to have once we do find that bow. Meanwhile, the Dark Maze is made quite simple by having the lamp. Nicky getting built out there with finding the big key, being able to run up and get her 10 bombs, which are added to this game actually in the latest version to accommodate for the bomb escape, which will give you 10 bombs instead of 3 to work.
Yes, and aLderzz, meanwhile, having received both items, I believe both items. Definitely the important one in the form of the hammer, but continuing on to face Vitreous here, as that is going to give him a crystal. We'll see as he goes on what strategy he elects to use. Without silver arrows, the quick kill on Vitreous is not going to be possible, but with boots and tempered sword, there is a dash strategy available. Sort of difficult to execute without cape, but still available. Spin strats are also still on the table. We'll see what he elects to do.
Yes, a lot of viable options here, as we do see Nicky opening up the entrance to Misery Mire. We'll be getting their hammer as well, as aLderzz is taking on Vitreous, opting to take the damage boost to spin the eyes. Of course, has to be careful because the eyes do a substantial amount of damage more than the goo does, but has that potion in order to heal back up and is onto phase 2. Takes him down, little trouble, and receives the ice rod, which is the other of our required rods. And with that, his second crystal. Third, my apologies.
Yes, and with Quake to unlock Turtle Rock, He has Samaria to get in, Lamp to light the way, and Mire to get through to Mimic Cave. So we may see him going up to Turtle Rock immediately.
It does look like you might be right, as Nicky picks up the hammer. We'll be very glad to find that item after an hour almost. Well, more than an hour, actually.
And it looks like instead of Turtle Rock, aLderzz electing to enter Ice Palace. Another, I would say, equally good play in this circumstance. This is a dungeon that he can full clear. It's a crystal dungeon, and with the items available to him, he should be able to make fairly short work of it. The one that he is missing that he might be interested in having is the Bombos medallion, which would let him open up Cold Stare while saving some magic for Ice Rod, or excuse me, for Fire Rod to do extra damage. But with half magic, he is electing to just hop in there anyway.
Yes, having both the Cane of Sumaria as well as the hookshot will make the routing in this dungeon quite a lot smoother, for there is a particular bomb jump that can be performed in order to skip the vast majority of this dungeon. Having a little bit of trouble with these berries here, but gets through without much trouble.
Yeah, and I wondered if we might see this. With Cane of Samaria and Hookshot, I believe that technically it is maybe slightly faster not to do this bomb jump. Gives you the opportunity to go straight down with one of the extra smallest keys that you get. And when you know that you're going to be full clearing it anyway, as our routers will be doing as they're not yet in go mode, I think if you theory craft it out, that does actually save a couple of seconds over performing the bomb jump. And leaves you with the decrease in execution required, as that bomb jump, although most people do master it pretty early on, can be tricky, can take you a couple tries.
Yes, it does take two pixel perfect placements of both a bomb and Link himself. But speaking about go mode, I believe that the bow is the only thing we need in order to finish this seed further. So while pedestal may not be of any importance, the bow could still be pretty much anywhere.
Yes, there are a lot of because our runners do have access to a fair number of dungeons at this point. Lots of different choices for how they can choose to route things in order to find the bow and potentially still be able to take some dungeons in go mode. One dungeon in particular that the runners almost certainly are hoping to do in go mode, Swamp Palace. Anytime you can avoid that left-hand side, that's something that you want to do.
Yes, I do expect that we will see Swamp Palace as one of the last options our runners will check for any items. Of course, Swamp Palace has the most amount of items out of any dungeon at 6. So it is a rather valuable dungeon, but when you are looking for just that one item.
And Nickynoel taking a few eyeball hugs from Vitreous, but in the end, with Tempered Sword, that's a pretty straightforward fight. And she does manage to finish him off, get her Ice Rod, and get her, I believe, 3rd crystal as well. Oh, no, excuse me, just 2nd crystal for her.
No, I believe you were correct.
No, okay, yep. I'm having difficulty seeing Moldorm here, but that does make 3.
Yes, although my prediction might be incorrect, as we may see Nicky opting to check out Swamp Palace before Ice Palace, which in and of itself is not a bad play. Of course, the sheer amount of items is a very compelling idea to take a little peek inside.
Yeah, and when you are given all the items to clear it, hookshot, hammer, and flippers and mirror, very similar, of course, to the items that are needed for Ice Palace. But having everything at once, some runners kind of view that as a signal that Swamp Palace is going to contain their progression.
Yes, a lot of runners like to follow the breadcrumbs, as they say, in order to kind of figure out where the seed wants them to go. Of course, that could also backfire, as it may send you on a wild goose chase. Meanwhile, we do see aLderzz falling into the Cold Step fight, and I hope you didn't blink because it's already over.
Yes, he got a very nice spin off there in the beginning to knock them into the corner, and then just wailed on them with the Temper Sword, finishing off 2 puffs very quick and getting the 3rd one shortly after that, and receiving the red mail for his troubles, in addition to his 4th crystal.
That is also kind of vanilla, a mill upgrade in the Ice Palace. Meanwhile, we do see Nicky making her way through the Swamp Palace. Apologies, I slipped on the name then. I wanted to call it the Water Temple. There is a lot of water here.
Not quite as annoying as Ocarina of Time's Water Temple.
It looks like aLderzz will be making the same play into the Swamp Palace as well. So it will be interesting to see if either of our runners decides that the left side is too much of a time investment. Because if the boat is there, then that might be a little troublesome for one of our runners.
Nickynoel finding the mushroom back here in, I believe, vanilla map chest, and is choosing to skip the left-hand side, just go directly on and finish up aLderzz. Probably if she doesn't receive all of the items, we'll be coming back in here to check those 2 left side chests before moving on. But this can be a smart play if you end up getting what you need before having to check those chests.
Definitely so. With the acquisition of that mushroom, our runners might be a bit more inclined to leave the dungeon expecting some kind of trolley play from this seed here. Although I do believe that the map has been found, so there will be at least 1 item on the left side here, which, when you're only looking for 1 item, is a scary thought. Nicky heading on into the aLderzz fights, of course, with that tempered sword. No sweat, killing the little Argai. I believe that's what they're called. The little Argai.
Sounds fair. If one's aLderzz, then 2 are Argai, right?
Pretty much, yeah, that's how plurals work. Of course, only taking 2 spins as Nicky swiftly and professionally dispatches of aLderzz, getting 1 of the 2 single rupees. but more importantly, crystal.
Yes, and aLderzz, meanwhile, choosing to route in left side immediately. In the end, perhaps not a big divergence here, as I suspect, we'll see here in just a second. No, Nickynoel, it looks like not electing to go back in for that final item of Swamp Palace, instead going to flute away and potentially check a few things with that mushroom. Oh, and wrong again. She has gone to Death Mountain. It looks like we may be seeing our play up for... I'm not sure if our runners have checked the Ether tablet yet, so we may be seeing that. More relevantly, I think that we will be seeing an entrance into Turtle Rock from Nickynoel.
I believe we did see that there was only an arrow upgrade. I'm reaching far here, but it does look like we are going to get at least a dip into the Turtle Rock, which in terms of items is the superior play to either going back and checking the left side or getting Deadrock by the Deadrocks here. I have to wait for them to come back alive.
And aLderzz opening those two left-hand side chests, we see that one of them is a heart container, the other one is a piece of heart. So in the end, that decision to put off left-hand side may turn out to be a boon for Nickynoel.
And definitely. Also, one thing that I would like to notice is that aLderzz has not picked up any shields. So, by logic, if the bow happens to be on Laser Bridge, there still might be another shield in the mix here for Nicky. Of course, I have no doubt that both of these runners know how to do the laser skip.
Yes, absolutely correct. By logic, either an invincibility item, so Cape or Cane of Burna, or the Mire Shield is required to check Laser Bridge. In practice, not typically necessary, but useful to know. Nickynoel, with both the Fire Rod and the Hook Shot, will be able to check these two chests in the fastest way possible, using the Hook Shot to pull herself off of that platform and jump into that door. And then keeping the Hook Shot equipped, using its invincibility to get through those spike rollers. I always find that's a fun trick to watch.
Yeah, certain items in this game have very weird properties. There are so many of these little things that just make this game such a charming masterpiece. On that note, a bit of random trivia. The berries will occasionally electrify themselves. If Link hits them with his sword or any other weapon, that means that Link will be electrocuted as well. If one were to save and quit during the electrification and start the same file again, they will not be given a choice of where to respawn.
Yes, they go directly to the Sanctuary in that case. And I believe the official explanation for that, as documented in the Minor Glitches Compendium, is Shrug emoticon. So many parts of this game that are just beyond comprehension. Such a good game, and yet such a poorly programmed game in so many ways.
Yes, thankfully though, some of these pesky bugs are squashed by the development team of the Randomizer. So big shout outs to them, because of course this all would not be possible without them. As we did see aLderzz clearing out the Argus, and
yes, and he is going to dip back in here as he did not pick up the big key before his two passes by the big chest. He's going to take a stop in here and get that last chest open, see what item is contained within.
Yes, Nikki having a little bit of trouble with the pokey and the idol, but only finds a small key in the big key lock.
And we are going to see from aLderzz here a mushroom check. Now he has, unfortunately, is entering the building here. He is going to have to have a screen transition happen before the witch will reveal her item. What we may see from him here, if he does not like the item that he gets, is a hard reset of the console or emulator. That will allow him to retain that mushroom. And in the end, he does get cape, and he does decide that he wants it, so we won't see that. What that does mean is that without powder, we will not be able to see what is on Magic Bat. If he had so chosen, he may have executed a glitch called Fake Powder using the Cane of Samaria's animation to take a look at that item contained on the Magic Bat without actually having the powder item. I wonder if we may, after we go through Turtle Rock, see Nickynoel choose to do that.
That would be definitely an interesting play, as powder has still yet to be found. But also on that note, I do not believe that aLderzz checked the bumper cave. So he might be thinking that progression lies on there. Because first he will also be taking a dip into the Turtle Rock, just as Nicky is getting to the end of it.
Nickynoel taking a brief stop off at a intermediate platform here in the Turtle Rock Darkroom maze, just to pick up a couple of hearts and a full magic refill. Kind of nice before going into Laser Bridge if you're concerned about getting that laser skip, or if you're worried about your health for Trinex.
Yes, we do see Nicky performing what is called the laser skip. We'll be able to get access to these 4 chests. Has to be extremely careful though. Now, Nicky does decide to use her potion in order to heal her up, but on the other hand, she could have chosen to bomb open the wall on the opposite side of this room. Because in a dungeon, if you happen to die, there, once you click save and continue, you will start from the last opening that you entered the dungeon from.
And Nickynoel, not finding too much on the laser bridge, will be going ahead to Trinex here. With Tempered Sword and both the Fire and Ice Rods, not too difficult, just 5 hits to each of the side heads. And then a couple of hits, I think 6 hits with Tempered Sword to the main body of Trinex to finish him off. Making a heads-up play and making that switch to Fire Rod before doing the last hit of damage to the red head. If you do not do that, you cannot enter the menu while you are while a boss enemy is in its death animation, and so you're just sort of stuck there, unable to stun the ice head, waiting for something to happen.
Yes, and with that being said, Nicky swiftly takes care of Trinex. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to combo this into her visit to GT, as we find that our progression is not at Trinex. Now, the amount of locations that are still left are dwindling quite fast. I don't believe either of our runners has been to Spike Cave, though. Of course, they got a bottle fairly early, which makes it within logic, as well as the cave being available. So it'll be interesting to see where our runners go.
Yes, then After Turtle Rock is usually an ideal place to route that in, but Nickynoel instead choosing and going to trade in the mushroom. It looks like, as she has not saved, so she won't be able to do a hard reset here, it looks like she is also not interested in the item on Magic Bat. Considering that the runners do need the powder to be in logic for Magic Bat to have a progression item, they may just be banking on the fact that having not found the powder, it's very unlikely at this point that Magic Bat will actually be in logic.
Yes, it does look like we will be seeing another Ice Palace dive from Nicky here. As for aLderzz side, I would almost see him going back into Skull Woods, maybe thinking that Sahasra has the bow, maybe. Because other than that, we pretty much covered the vast majority of Hyrule.
Yeah, having seen dips into all of the relevant dungeons, I'm trying to think what overworld locations are left that remain unchecked. aLderzz executing a pretty neat strategy here, using a Boots Monk to get over the spike roller in that cave, and then unfortunately missing Samaria and giving a couple of anger slashes there. That's an easy thing to do.
Yes, definitely. But also, one of the locations that has not been checked as an overall location, as I was kind of recounting where our runners haven't been, is the Hammerpack Cave near the Kakariko village.
Absolutely, good point. Both of our runners did take care of Jeremiah the blacksmith, turned him in, and continued the rest of that quest, routing it pretty efficiently, taking care of Purple Chest and Bombos Tablet, but did not do Hammer Pegs, as I believe neither of them had the hammer at that time.
No, the hammer was fairly late for this seed, so all of the local fetch quests had already been completed. So it does look like we are coming down to the last few possible locations here. Nicky going to one of my favorite rooms to just spam the hook shot to get rid of all of the berries. As aLderzz will be heading into his Strinex fight, gets the ice rod ready. Of course, again, has to take 5 swings at each head in order to clear it out.
Oh, and shooting that ice rod just a little bit too soon, having to take a small break there before that head becomes unpetrified to do it again. Apart from that, taking out those 2 side heads in pretty short fashion, and we'll see now the main head probably going to be taken out pretty equally.
Definitely onto phase 2 of Trinex here. A couple of flashes to the body, takes him down. Also, on a quirky side note, what you'll see most runners do is before the second phase of Trinex, they will charge up a spin attack, because as the shell is exploding, Trinex will transform into his snake form. But during the first couple of seconds, his head is also vulnerable. So that will allow the runners to get in some early hits with gold sword damage. Because the way that the sword damage stacks in this game is pokes will do damage equivalent to one level lower, and spins will do damage equivalent to the level above it, with the exception of the gold sword, which will do level 4 damage at all time.
Yes, and with the cape, Spike Cave is in logic. And of course, with half magic and bottles for potions, both of our runners are going to be able to get through that without too much difficulty anyway. But aLLderzz making the check, and unfortunately getting just a 10 bomb capacity upgrade for his trouble.
And it is not our progression. I also like to point out that we have found a lot of hearts at this point, as aLLderzz was able to go through Spike Cave without using any safeties or potions. And I do believe we will see aLLderzz taking a stab at the Skull Woods. Probably.
Yeah, what'll be interesting here is, of course, we know that Skullwoods does not contain the progression he's looking for. It'll be interesting. Yeah, and it does look like he's heading up there. He did have the option to come back down here and check hammer pegs quick, which we're thinking right now may be where our progression lies. Unfortunately, choosing to go into Skullwoods first before going back there.
Yes, now also a point to notice is, because the hammer is such a heavily required item, and with both of our runners having completed both of the fetch quests within that area, they may have dismissed the entire Kakariko area as completed, which might cause some trouble as we see Nicky finishing off Cold Stare, getting their red mail as well, showing off, as you said earlier, that the eyes do turn red.
Yes, Nickynoel not getting quite the same perfect hit into the corner as aLLderzz did during her fight, ending up making use of the fire rod, but still in the end getting it polished off without too much danger. Oh, and aLLderzz checking bonk rocks. I believe we've seen Nickynoel check this, and yep, we just have a B with a bottle in it, so also not our progression.
Yes, Nicky did manage to remember to get the bonk rocks, which still leaves one bottle out on the table. Of course, we still have the entirety of Ganon's Tower to go through.
Yes, and Nickynoel now checking Spike Cave as aLLderzz finishes up that sort of north side mini loop, checking Graveyard Ledge and presumably King's Tomb after that. As we know, none of these contain our progression, so after that, we're coming down to the wire. We may see either of our runners go and check hammer pegs.
Yes, I do believe that at the moment is our last location here for Nicky, as she has pretty much full cleared the rest of the game, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, and aLLderzz perhaps maybe having already checked King's Tomb, as he did not make that check again just now, is going back up into Skull Woods. Oh, and Nickynoel, very interesting, having not defeated Aghanim 1 as aLLderzz has, or checked Lumberjack Ledge, does have to finally route in that check.
Thankfully, though, only a bundle of arrows rests on top of that.
aLLderzz, meanwhile, checking Bumper Cave, knowing that he has the cape for it if he needs it, but just seeing a piece of heart will not be going in for that. And now it looks like Nickynoel may be making the fateful decision here. She is hitting that Kakariko Dark World Warp and heading to the right-hand side, selecting the hammer from her menu. It looks like we may be seeing what we believe to be the final overworld check here.
Yes, unless we missed some minor location, this is pretty much the last place it can be. Now, before we get it though, we can see Nicky performing another minor glitch. I'll wait until we see what it is. And it is indeed our bow. Nicky is officially in go mode. We'll be able to finish off the Palace of Darkness and head straight up to Ganon's tower. Now, to finish off my story, if you press the dash button and on the same frame hit the item button, Link will enter a state where two actions will be performed. Primarily, you will still perform a dash, which allows you to move at the dash speed. But incidentally, it will also cause the active item to be permanently active, as well as its effect on the world. As you saw there on the hammer pegs, it will instantly knock down all of the pegs. This works with pretty much every item, including items such as shovel, the bow, and as well as the hookshot.
Yes, and aLderzz with hammer and boots is going over to that very same screen. Almost certainly he will be executing the same glitch, receiving the same bow, and heading into the same final dungeon for him as well, Palace of Darkness, meaning that our runners are separated now by just a matter of maybe a minute and 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So very close race coming up here to the end.
Yes, this is definitely a very close race. A randomizer race is not over until one of the runners has collected the Triforce piece, because truly anything can happen in a randomizer race, as you saw there.
Yes, and one thing worth noting, while Nickynoel did pick up the silvers, aLderzz has not yet done that, and considering their location, depending on whether he chooses to open additional chests, he may get them or he may not. And having those silvers versus not makes a significant time difference when it comes down to facing Ganon.
Definitely, of course. If you remember, the silver arrows were in the Harmless Hellway, which is, in my opinion, one of the more out-of-the-way chests if you are in go mode. But, of course, not having silvers might prompt aLderzz to look around a bit more, depending on how comfortable his silverless Ganon is.
Yes, and given that the runners have full cleared most dungeons at this point, he may have be thinking, you know, I have relatively few locations left in the world. Maybe I'll just polish this off just to make sure that I get silvers and have that quicker Ganon fight in the end.
Yes, and with that, we find out finally where that Bombos medallion is. But more importantly, we have the final crystal. Now, we have a long-standing tradition here at the Link to the Past randomizer when our runners are on the final stretch. Now, if you would like to explain what that tradition is?
Absolutely. So there are 22 locations inside Ganon's tower that may or may not contain the big key. What we tend to do is, so in our channel now, Randomizer 2, we don't have a fun little bot to take care of it, but if you like, get your guesses in chat, numbers 1 through 22, as to what location you think will contain the big key. And we will see here as Nickynoel makes the journey up Dark Mountain for the last time to unlock Ganon's Tower, get in there, where that is and who can get the closest.
So where do you reckon our runners will find the big key?
Let's see. We also don't know a couple of different routes to go up Ganon's Tower. There's one more common one and a few less common ones. Oh, and as I say that, aLderzz here does pick up the silver arrows, so we are going to be seeing a fairly evenly matched Ganon fight. But
Yes.
as Nicky enters the Dark World, I'm going to make a guess at, let's say, location number 6. Why not? I'm going to say she'll check the Hope Chest, go on to the right-hand side, and find it in that 4-chest room with the Stalfos. How about you?
Okay, fair enough. Seeing as though we have had a pretty much 100% seed, I'm going to be a bit cruel here and predict it's going to be in the tile room, number 22.
Very interesting. And as the stairs come down on Ganon's Tower, as aLderzz making his way through Pod, we will start to see how close we are. And Nickynoel entering Ganon's Tower at almost exactly 1 hour and 46 minutes. So once aLderzz enters in, we'll be able to get a pretty good idea of exactly how close they are to each other. We can say at this point, it is pretty close.
Yes, definitely. As we find that our first item is just a compass.
Yeah, and Nickynoel taking the NMG strats and opting to just do the left side without checking those 2 chests in the so-called Hope Room on the right-hand side.
Also, finding Powder, going for the Dark Magician strat, which is getting the torch as well as the 4 items on the left side, and then going ahead and full clearing the right side.
Yeah, very interesting. Not one that's seen perhaps the most commonly, but really all of those routes give just sort of minor variations as the items are distributed fairly evenly across Ganon's Tower. So it really comes down to almost a sort of meta decision. We are, however, seeing Nickynoel checking Tile Room before moving on the right-hand side. So if your guess of Tile Room is correct, it will not turn out to be chest number 22 in this case.
That is definitely true. Most of our runners will opt to check this chest last, as it takes a considerable amount of time to wait for the tiles to fly at you. So if this is the big key...
Yes, Nickynoel making use of a minor glitch here, holding onto the wall while using Cape. If you do that, it does not consume any magic. Unfortunately, just getting a 300 rupees here, so that smaller coffee break, during which you have to hold a button, unfortunately not paying off.
Just put a rubber band around your controller, right? Easy fix.
Yeah, set your stapler on it, no problem.
Meanwhile, though, aLderzz getting finally rid of the last boss will be heading up to the tower as well. As we find the Mire shield.
Yes, with no Cape of Burna and Mire shield, it looks like Cape was the intended item that Logic wanted you to use to get through Laser Bridge. Although, of course, no progression ended up in Laser Bridge either, so it's kind of a moot point.
Nicky showing off that the boots will also propel you over small gaps. We will most likely be seeing it again here to bonk over the invisible bridge there. As we will be seeing Bob. And there is our final sword. The golden sword, which is a very nice safety to have. So thank you, Bob, as we go into the Almost 2 fight.
Yes, Nickynoel, even though she is a little bit low on health and did get the powder, choosing to spare Bob and not use him to create a fury, just as a show of respect.
And it does look like the big key is on the left side. So depending on aLderzz's route, he could still catch up.
Yes, we are seeing aLderzz unlock Ganon's tower at 1 hour and 50 minutes. So a difference of about 4 minutes and 15 seconds between them entering Ganon's tower. If we see aLderzz go straight left and pick up the key a little bit quicker, that difference could be rapidly diminished.
Yes, of course, Nicky has no need to go into the Stealthos room. We'll be straight into the map room, only getting an arrow upgrade. But
wow, and aLderzz as well, choosing to go to right-hand side first. We'll see in just a second here. It does look like he will be saving tile room for last. So making up a little bit of time perhaps on Nickynoel, but not getting the ideal time save of going to the left first.
Definitely. It will be interesting to see if aLderzz decides to full clear to Ice Amos, or if he decides to drop out early. Nicky having a little bit of trouble getting the boomerang strat to work, but gets through with the Cane of Sumaria. And as I mentioned earlier, we do see Elder opting to mirror out early in order to go check out the left side. So this is very much still anyone's game at this point.
Absolutely. Like we said earlier, a lot of decisions on how you route Ganon's tower, and ultimately, because of the distribution, comes down to a certain extent, just a matter of luck and execution going up the tower itself.
Now we are in the randomizer room, which is aptly named because you will only see it in the randomizer, and the number for today is 21. So congratulations to whoever guessed 21.
Yes, perhaps not the chest that we ordinarily see as number 21, but still the 21st chest that Nickynoel checked. And she is going to head up that center passageway, get through this first part here, hit up the gauntlet, and make her way to Ganon.
Now, with that being said, what will our viewers receive? What will our winner receive for correctly guessing the extremely late big key?
Well, since about the only key item that we haven't found yet is Cane of Birna, how about our lucky winner receives a Cane of Birna? Can make themselves invisible and do minor damage to bosses and generate a ton of lag. I think that's the most important thing that Birna does.
Definitely. This game has occasionally a lot of trouble keeping up with whatever we decide to do with it. Of course, Nicky will be entering the gauntlet here with the gold sword, about 1.5 row of hearts, and all of the safeties in the world. I doubt that our runners will have any trouble getting through the gauntlet.
Yeah, with half magic, making extensive use of the fire rod here, that can really speed up doing the gauntlet, as it gives you a ranged attack that is essentially an instant kill on all the enemies that are relevant here.
Yes, of course, the fire rod being one of the most powerful weapons in the game, arguably up there with the silver arrows, as Nicky uses them to dispatch of the second pair, or second trio rather, of Landmolas. Sorry, blanked on the name then.
Yes, with silver arrows, with fire rod, with butter sword, all of those very efficient methods of taking out that land mola street fight. Nicky opts for the butter sword to finish off the last one there.
Yes, meanwhile, aLderzz following closely behind as Nicky is moving on up towards the torch room.
Yes, Nicky getting the 0 cycle in that whiz rope room. Not necessarily a strat that you can master with a little bit of execution practice, but very tight timing, fun one to watch.
It is definitely one of the more satisfying strategies to get. Now, one thing our runners will have to look out for in the previous room is the door is only opened after all of the torches have been lit. But if by unfortunate circumstance our runners happen to enter through the door as it's closing, the game gets a little confused. The screen transition will continue as normal, but all of these spikes would have disappeared, which will make this Moldom fight impossible to complete, as well as despawning Aghanim himself.
Ooh, and Nickynoel taking an immediate fall to our good friend Trolldorm 2 here. Sometimes he just charges at you with his head, and there's not really a lot that you can do.
Yes, of course, holding out your sword and pushing in the opposite direction, as Nicky is doing right now, will prevent you from falling off. And with that being said, Moldom 2 is down.
And of course, one other consequence of their route divergence, Nicky did find that butter sword, aLderzz did not. That sped up Moldorm 2 a little bit, as 2 hits of anything, any butter sword variation of damage will take him out. aLderzz will have to hit a slash and a spin to take out Moldorm 2. Also, a very slight difference in terms of how many hits it takes on Ganon. Will be just 6 with the butter sword, whereas 12 with the tempered sword. And as we are coming down to the wire here, that may prove to be a relevant difference.
Yes, of course, the difference between the gold sword and the tempered sword is not substantial. It will still save a little bit of time as Nicky takes care of the second Aghanim.
Yes, getting a couple of nice doubles there, possibly a triple. It's difficult to tell. If you reflect 2 projectiles that are too close to one another, sometimes that'll register as a double instead of a triple.
Yes, you will have to wait until Aghanim's invincibility frames have been passed before another hit can be dealt.
Yes, meanwhile, aLderzz getting the spin and slash off on Moldorm 2, electing to skip that final chest. Not too excited about the prospects of it containing butter sword, and turns out to be correct, as Nickynoel starts the Ganon fight. Finishing off the first cycle in relatively short order, she will activate the cape and ignore that fire bat damage entirely to finish off, get those 6 strikes that she needs in, finish off cycle, or phase 2, excuse me, of Ganon.
Yes, as we see aLderzz taking on the second Aghanim.
Yeah, missing all 3, unfortunately, with that one. But getting 1 just there on that cycle that Nicky got a double on. But finishing off Aghanim 2, as Nickynoel gets her first silver arrow hit on Ganon, hitting Torch Glitch, but not getting him for the second one there. Tagging him with the second arrow, and potentially from this position, she may be able to get a double arrow hit. But not trying to go for it. Instead, just lighting the torch, missing Ganon with a slash there, but freezing him and getting that 4th arrow in to finish off Ganon and end this race. Nickynoel is going to be our winner on this one, just as aLderzz enters Ganon with a final time of 1 minute 59 seconds, or excuse me, 1 hour. That would be quite something. 1 hour 59 minutes and just about 20 seconds.
Yes, just barely short of the 2-hour mark. But to elaborate on what you said earlier, the torch glitch is a very interesting condition of this fight, which will speed it up quite considerably. Because due to the way that the triggers for these two torches work, is the one on the left will go out first, and after which the right one is scripted to go out. Now, in order to
Yes,
damage...
and we do have Nickynoel in the waiting room. We will pull her in just as soon as aLLderzz is finished with his fight here and interview them both at once.
Yes, to continue my story as well, if the left torch is lit before the right one goes out, the trigger for the right torch to go out is completely skipped, therefore only requiring you to tend to one torch.
And aLLderzz finishing up phase 3, not quite getting the double on Ganon that may have been possible there, and missing torch glitch as well. Not so essential. He maybe was trying to line up for another double there, but instead the torch goes out at exactly the wrong time. He's going to relight those after dodging that fire bat, and maybe position Ganon such that he can, yes, get the double there, get the third and fourth silver arrows in simultaneously, and finish up this fight as well. He's going to end up with a final time of almost exactly 2 minutes after Nicky here. 2 hours, 1 minute, and looks like about 5 seconds in the end.
Yes,
very close
GG.
race. Congratulations to both of our runners.
GG to both of these runners. Again, we will try to get them in here for a post-race interview.
Okay, and it looks like we do have Nickynoel here in voice chat with us. Nickynoel, GG, congratulations on your win, and thank you for that very close race.
Yeah. I don't even know how, to be honest. It's like, I mean, my tracker is great. I have 5 chests in GT and what is it? Pyramid Fairy, 3 chests in Eastern, and 3 chests in Swamps that are not shaked. Which, I mean, I guess you saw it by my routing in GT that I was pretty confident that I had to make plays in order to pull this around.
Yeah, the two of you were about 4 minutes apart going into Ganon's tower, so the choice in routing there really was essential. And unfortunately, you ended up with exactly the wrong one, but it did still work out in the end.
Yeah, apparently.
Yes, this race was indeed a very close one, coming down right to the wire. Of course, this seed has been pretty linear in the beginning. What are your thoughts on the way that this seed played out, being an almost two-hour run for you?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, just nothing went right. I mean, I saw at some point when I came late back to the libraries that this should be a run for the boots because the boots unlock the flute and then it's like you suddenly have movement. And then I found the boots very late, dipped out immediately to get the flute, and then realized you shouldn't have done that. You should have just gone further onto part. And at this point, I want to apologize for using a major glitch, but people had the opinion that it is allowed. So, and besides the silvers, it didn't even help.
Yeah, that pot glitch to unlock the camera did end up being classed as a minor glitch, and in the long run, regardless of, there's lots of different opinions on that, but didn't end up being a major difference in this run. So regardless of how you see it, turned out okay.
Yeah, it was the first time I ever actually did that, which people might have been able to guess. But yeah, I mean, I guess except the silvers, which I else would probably not have gotten considering go mode item.
Okay, and sorry for that technical difficulty there. We do have aLderzz pulled into chat here. aLderzz, GG on that very close race.
GG, Nicky. Good race.
GG.
Oh
Yes.
my god, that shovel miss early tilted me so hard. I don't know if you could tell from my play, but missing that shovel and then going to shovel spot, realize I didn't pick up the shovel. I was so tilted for the rest of the run after that.
Yes,
Yeah, so we didn't actually tell Nicky that yet.
Oh
Yeah.
god.
aLderzz up there on Spectacle Rock, Mire just out of place to get the shovel, came down to dig spot, checked the menu, and realized at that point that he didn't have it, and so had to make some very different routing choices. In the end, coming up very close because he did end up getting Quake and Ether medallions a little bit early and was able to route things a little bit differently, but still, yeah, pretty unfortunate mistake there.
Yeah. I mean, after missing that, I knew I was going to be really far behind just from that mistake. So I kind of decided to try and do things a little different, which is why I'm assuming I was the only one that ended up the Naga one because it was 100% not required.
Yeah, but for that, I mean, I went to desert before I even cleared desert before I even went to Death Mountain, and I also cleared Skywoods because I basically cleared everything except
All right.
10 or 12 chests. So
Okay.
yeah, Ega 1 was the one. I did check it right before going to Hammerpacks, which was the very last overworld location for the bow.
Yeah, that was pretty much the last location I checked as well. I only had really 2 or 3 locations left after that.
Yeah, after that I had Eastern, which please not, and 3 chests I left in Swamp, which I mean, yeah, I would have gone there then, but
I'd already cleared Eastern before, I think. Yeah, I did. I cleared Eastern pretty early on. When I missed the shovel, I kind of pushed towards there to see if it had anything.
oh
But
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, around the time that the two of you were clearing Spike Cave, we were racking our brains on commentary, trying to figure out what was left unchecked, and we realized about that time, based on what we had seen from both of you together, Hammer Pegs was about the only location left that could have the bow. So it was just a matter at that point of waiting to see who was going to look there first.
Yeah, it was kind of. I mean, we had the Titans with earlies and the mirrors, so we did frogs and everything beforehand, I guess. And then
Yeah.
very far later came the hammers. So Hammer Pegs was not really the biggest point of contention, attention, whatever.
Just out of interest, what was the difference going into Ganon's Tower?
Going into Ganon's Tower, you were about 4 minutes and maybe 10 seconds apart.
Oh wow, really?
Nickynoel chose to go Dark Magician route, checking the Stalfos chests and then doing full right side. So she did end up with a Butter Sword, but did spend a little bit longer getting the key than you did.
Yeah, basically
Okay.
Render Room was the very last place I checked was in GT, so
That kind of helped me a bit.
checking everything else.
I felt like I had a pretty good GT. That's why I was wondering how close we were entering, because I felt like I had quite a good gauntlet to finish so close. I wasn't sure how far apart we were.
Yeah, you both had excellent gauntlets, excellent final race, and coming within 2 minutes of each other after all the divergences that did end up happening in routing, really quite something.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the race, Nicky. It was great. Stressful, and I'll be tilted for life, I think, after that shovel. It's still haunting me.
Yeah, so I have to admit, if I want to make it to brackets, I need to get more lucky. Checking everything will not work every time.
Yeah, I'm the same with my route. I kind of end up checking everything as well. I need to start working on my routing a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
For
that's
that, but
kind of the thing with standard nowadays. You get all the items, suddenly have 50 places to check for one
yeah.
item, and then it's get lucky.
Yeah, that V29 logic, it seems like it's very common to get that flood of items early and then spend that last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes on that single item hunt.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I found anyway. That one troll item.
Yes, and with that being said, this will mark the end of this race between Nicky and aLderzz. Again, congratulations and GG's to both of our runners. Be sure to follow them as well as our tracker. Thank you very much, Michael K. and our restreamer Zelnas, as well as thank you to my co-commentator, Estragon.
Yes, and thank you, Stan, for joining me on commentary. thanks to both of our runners for an incredible, great fun race to watch. We'll be looking forward to seeing both of you in further matches in the tournament.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for the commentary and the restream. Much appreciated, and good luck in the next round, Nikki. Again, GG. Thanks for the race.
Yeah, same, everyone. Thanks for the GG's chat. Apparently, you all enjoyed the very close race.
Yeah, that's all we can ask for. I like a close race.